I believe we are live with our Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition panel for Onyx PathCon. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, everyone who is here on Twitch right now, and of course, everyone who tunes in later when this gets exported to YouTube. We may even do an audio version of this for the Onyx Pathcast. Who knows? The world is our oyster. I come to you at this early hour American time with a bunch of Europeans because it's long been my plan, my agenda, my Machiavellian scheme to ensure that every single developer of Vampire the Masquerade is in fact European. We're just going to cut North America out entirely, and I feel at this point that plan has come to fruition. So I'm going to introduce the people on this panel. Alongside me, you probably know who I am. My name is Matthew Dawkins. I am the in-house World of Darkness developer at Onyx Path Publishing. I also oversee the They Came From lines, some of the 5th edition lines as well. And I will introduce one of the people next to me, and then they can introduce one of the people next to them, and so on. So next we have Clara Herbal. Clara, please tell the audience who you are.
Hi, I'm Clara. Most of you know me, I think. And I am a writer and I'm a developer for Vampire the Masquerade and a lot of other books. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today. I've written on Chicago by Night. I found this nice background. I hope you like it. And I've written on Calls of the Blood Gods. And yeah, I'm excited to be on this panel. And am I supposed to introduce someone else?
Yes. Let's do like a chain letter thing. Yeah.
Right, so I'm going to introduce Steffi. Take it away.
Yes, I'm Steffi de Vaan. I'm Dutch. I'm a writer and developer for Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, Prometheus, which I still think we should do a lot with. Legend Floor, but that's an entirely different game. I also make indie games for myself. City of Blood is the most recent one, and it's exactly what you would expect from a game called City of Blood. And I'm very excited to talk about all things Vampire. I'm perpetually Team Anarch, even if the recent quiz tried to tell me that I am, what was it again? Gangrel. Actually, not a bad fit. Okay, John, your turn.
Hello everyone, I'm John Burke. I'm not Dutch. I am a developer for Vampire the Masquerade, in particular the book Forbidden Religions, which is coming soon. I've been writing on a whole load of other books. They Came From, Contagion Chronicle, various others. And my outside of writing hobbies include misleading innocent Dutch people through car parks for extended periods of time.
That's a Dennis Nilsson style brag. I think it's a bit early for serial killer humor right now. So anyway,
never too early for serial killer humor.
No, in Europe right now it's the afternoon, so that's perfect. That's optimal time. So one thing I realized as we were setting this panel up, and by all means, my co-panelists can correct me if I am wrong. I don't believe there has been a vampire book that all of us were on at the same time. Because Steffi pointed out before we started that she wasn't on Chicago by Night. John and Clara were. Clara wasn't on Cults of the Blood Gods, but was on Trails of Ash and Bone and Children of the Blood. But Steffi and John were on Cults of the Blood Gods. Steffi and John were on Forbidden Religions, but Clara wasn't. And if you go over to Modiphius, John wasn't on The Fall of London, but Clara and Steffi were. So I'm just trying to think. Chicago Folios and Let the Streets Run Red. Steffi was on Let the Streets Run Red, and so was Clara, but John wasn't. John was on Chicago Folios, and Clara was, but Steffi wasn't. So somehow this team has never come together. It's like having, the 4 parts of a nuclear weapon in 4 corners of the room. If you need to keep them all at least mostly separate, because when they come together, you get a UK Games Expo style event, as we had a couple of years ago, back when the world world was healthy. And yeah, people start getting lost in car parks. It's mayhem.
Yes.
So yeah.
So, but I'm hearing future goals.
Future goals, yeah. That there has never been a reason why not. So yeah, I'm not sure why that
like
hasn't
the Power
happened.
Rangers.
But you know,
it becomes like
I mean,
the big
yeah.
That should just be our pitch. Any book with us four.
Just us four.
And then they'll be like, yes, and no, that's the pitch.
Yeah, if that's not a sales pitch to Paradox, I don't know what is. And Renegade, of course. So one of the first things we should probably talk about here, in fact, one of the first things we'll talk about is going to be upcoming releases, because I imagine a lot of people are going to tune into this panel to talk about upcoming releases or hear about them. And so the books that are currently on the way, you have Trails of Ash and Bone. The backer copy of that went out to backers of Cults of the Blood Gods last week. We are currently accumulating and inputting errata for that book, and that should be on sale within the next couple of weeks with any luck. We also have Forbidden Religions. Forbidden Religions is the book I co-developed with John here on the panel. We are currently receiving art for that, and that covers the way I've often pitched it to audiences is if religions like the Church of Set and the Mithraic Mysteries and the Nephilim and the Bahari and the Cult of Shalim are acceptable in vampire society, what could possibly classify as a forbidden religion? And this book does a pretty good job of exploring some rather obscure, weird, and dangerous religions. So I'm pretty confident people are going to find that a lot of fun. We'll talk about that in more detail soon. But after Forbidden Religions, Onyx Path don't have anything further for V5 on the docket. That doesn't mean there won't be more projects coming up, but at this time, and I could largely put this down to contracts being signed, new terms of business being arranged between Paradox and Renegade, because Renegade are now the primary partner in the Vampire the Masquerade production line. We haven't been moving forward with any of our projects. We need to know where we stand. And so until all of that is sorted out, those are the two books on the horizon. But that means this book will largely be, well, we'll have this panel will largely be Q&A. You can ask us questions, but we'll also be talking about projects we've worked on, some of the highlights, some of the things we would have done differently if we could have, our reflections on working on Vampire in general. At any point, if people in the chat want to ask us questions, just say question and then type in your question. And I don't mind interrupting John usually to ask the question to any of the panelists. So yes, we already have a question, in fact, from Flames Rising, a stalwart supporter of World of Darkness and Onyx Path. Hello, Matt. The question is, are there more VTT tokens? Yes, there will be. We intend to release virtual tabletop tokens from every single Vampire the Masquerade product we can. One of the good things we have done was with Chicago by Night recently. We released every single character from that book as virtual tabletop tokens, so you can start building your Elysium, your Succubus Club on virtual tabletop and moving those counters around to play it out like a battle map, if you wish. And they've been quite successful. So we'll be moving on to doing that for other books like Let the Streets Run Red, Chicago Folios, Cults of the Blood Gods, and so on and so forth. Any book that has character portraits or art from which we could snip out a circle of art that could constitute someone's face, that's what we will do, and sell it as VTT because it enables you to play with this stuff online more easily. So first question for the group is from Zach Rules. So let's ask, we'll go to Clara again first. Clara, how's your day going?
It's good. I have a good day. Yeah, I have had a nurse in real life, and I've had a pretty busy week, but yeah, other than that, I'm enjoying the Danish summer weather, which is rain. Yeah. I'm good. Thank you for asking.
That's all right. I don't know why I'm saying that's all right. Zach, that's up to you to say that's all right. Steffi, how is your day going?
Good, actually. We have, for once in the Netherlands, it's extremely sunny because we have a lot of rain, but it
You just
stops
have
when
to
it's
brag.
summer.
You just have to brag. I mean,
I have to brag. It is so, Clara, you wouldn't believe it. It is so blue out here
Oh my
and
God.
so warm. I mean, it's amazing. No, I've had a good day. Yeah.
And John, how is your day going?
Well, I live in Scotland, and as such, if I open these blinds right now, you'll all die from exposure. So, yeah. No, my day's going all right, I guess. My wife and daughter are off swimming in Erskine, so I've been left alone here to talk about vampires, which my daughter actually loves. And runs about the house pretending to be one with a towel wrapped around her with like a cape, and chasing me around the house.
Did she learn that from you?
No, I'm not normally wearing a cape, but or anything for that matter, as I run around the house. But yes, it's going pretty well today. I've had a crazy few weeks, so it's nice to have a day where I'm doing something normal, like talking about vampires with you guys.
Yeah.
Well, before we get back onto questions from the people in the gallery, let's talk about the first book most of us worked on, and its stretch goals that ultimately all of us worked on together, being Chicago by Night. So this is the first vampire book, or vampire 5th edition book, we all came together on in some form or other. Obviously, Chicago was a very big book. It was a very big project, very high profile. It was the first source book for V5 that wasn't produced in-house at Paradox or White Wolf, as it was at the time. And it was received very, very well. I don't mind saying it was critically acclaimed, and that warms my cold, dead heart. But I suppose a rather open question to the writers on Chicago and the stretch goals for Chicago. What reflections you have on that time? Any pressure to deliver? Any how excited you were to work on such a high-profile project? I throw it out to the room. So the first one of you to start talking with confidence about it, you go right ahead.
I wasn't on the book, so I'll start. Why wasn't I on the book? What was I doing? Was I developing Fall of London at the time?
I can't imagine I didn't hire you.
Yes, you probably asked, and I couldn't because, and I don't know why, because I would have said yes to any vampire project unless there was another project that I was doing for vampire. So I might have been developing Fall of London or writing for the Anarchs. I did a replacement piece. But yeah, I wasn't on it, so I have opinions. No, I think it's an amazing book. I'm partial to the By Night books. I like the city books. I never quite use them whole cloth. I pick and choose, characters that I like and factions that I like. But in general, I'm a huge fan of all the City by Night books, and I thought that this really lived up to every standard that series has ever had. It's an amazing book. And seriously, everyone should buy it. Even if you don't want to play in Chicago, you can use the characters and the coteries and the secrets and the excellent scenario that Clara wrote for it. I think it would be an amazing addition to any game.
I really appreciate you saying that. And yeah, I imagine you must have been working on some other project at the time. It may have even been Legend Lore in its early stages. I'm not sure, because I think we had worked on pretty much every project I had worked on by that point. You had also worked on.
Yeah.
But yeah, we quickly brought you back for Let the Streets Run Red, which we will talk about briefly. So what about you, John? What are your thoughts on Chicago by Night?
I personally think there's not enough heat on you for not hiring Steffi for that book, and I think that's where we should.
We'll just keep coming back around to that. Why didn't you hire me? I'm waiting for Clara to do that when we get to Cults of the Blood Gods. Yeah,
we'll you guys, you came here expecting
questions from Clara.
You came here expecting a vampire panel. You got an episode of Jerry Springer. What more do you want?
Yes.
And it looks like you guys are in the same room, so you can reach over and punch him.
Actually, yeah, it does.
The book itself, the first book I ever read for vampire, before the sort of revised. I think it was the first. How old was I when I was in first year at high school when I started playing vampire? So that would have been in 1994. So whichever was the edition that was kicking about then. And Chicago by Night was the first book that I read because my friend Chris had bought it and he wanted to run it. And he was like, I'll have a look at this. And I was like, wow. I actually think, my own trumpet here it is. I think that our version of Chicago by Night was better, personally. Just in terms of, I know some people aren't a big fan of big books, but I think the depth involved in it was far better for someone who's never been to Chicago, who lives in Britain and who has no kind of cultural
You're not supposed to admit to that, John. You're supposed to say, yeah, I know Chicago intimately.
No, I don't. My wife's been there, I haven't. But I thought that the stuff that it gave you was so helpful. So if I would feel with that book that if I wanted to run a game in Chicago, I could be quite confident that I've got everything I need to do it, rather than, I better make up a bunch of pubs and places and things, because I would have no idea what to put in it. And I recall when I was playing the game first, kind of not really having that sense of place, and it was because the DM was for Lanark, and I had no idea. It was just as far as I was concerned, Chicago was some warehouses in a river. But the book we've done, I think, particularly good work by Mike Tomasek, bringing out the sort of city section, which really allows you to flesh that out. And I just think it's so important to have that as someone who's not from there. And that's the kind of thing I like to see going forward. Also, some wonderful characters written by some wonderful people. I just think it was a great book and will stand the test of time.
And how about you, Clara? Steffi's already mentioned your contribution to Chicago by Night was the very popular Chronicle at its close. And but not everyone probably knows that you came in at the end of the first drafts period, if I remember. Yeah. It was after everyone else had submitted their work.
I did, yeah. I think the first question is why didn't you hire Steffi for the book?
The same reason I didn't hire you for the book early on is I'm an awful person.
You just try to avoid us at all costs.
Yeah.
No.
And yet you keep getting into these projects.
I was invited pretty late. I believe the original writer couldn't, finish the job. So I was asked if I wanted to do it in a very short timeline. And I said yes, very fearfully, because that would be the first. I knew how much pressure there would be on this chronicle to be special. It was special for me. And I know it would be special for the fans, so I really wanted to give it my all. And it was with a lot of excitement, but also a lot of fear and a lot of. I was very humble towards the project because it would be the first chronicle in V5, and that in itself is very terrifying for someone who has never really written something for a book that big. I wanted to do a good job, and luckily Matthew was there. He was a really good developer, helped me through with a lot of my questions and the storyline, and helped me with some of the characters. And all in all, I think I had a really good experience. I think it's probably still the project I'm the most proud about. Good experiences, great people to work with.
Well, no, I'm very glad you all think so, and I think the fan response it mirrors that. Everyone seems to appreciate Chicago by Night, at least the majority, the people who count. And I think everyone who worked on it and on its stretch goals should be very proud of their work, and proud of work they would have done had they been invited to work on the book, Steffi.
Yes.
Yeah. It was a book, actually. I guess it's difficult to find new pieces of information to talk about with Chicago by Night because we started working on it back in 2018, come to think of it. And many of us have been in interviews about it. We've spoken about it, tried to give peeks behind the curtain. And I've probably given so many peeks behind the curtain, now the curtain's just fallen off. But one thing that isn't widely known is Chicago by Night pretty much doubled in size from its outline to what was delivered. I believe it was supposed to be a 100,000 word book, and we ended up doing a 200,000 word book. And the reason was actually the size of the character bios. We, for whatever reason, initially sketched out that characters would take about 800 words apiece, with something like 400 words of that being their traits and the other 400 being their biographies. And then it became apparent through Vampire 5th edition that we needed to put a lot more focus on Vampire's mortal sides. This wasn't obvious through previous editions of Vampire the Masquerade. Vampires, when they were given bios, were almost always strongly focused on what has their life been since they became a vampire, since their embrace. But because V5 is strongly about the mortal element, we had to add that as well. And doing that, adding things like whispers, domains, their thralls and tools and all that, expanded every single character's bio. And we found that because of the sheer number of clans available, and this isn't even going into bloodlines, of course, that weren't introduced into V5 at this point, we ended up with a book. We spec'd out a book that probably would have had about 2 vampires per clan, because there's around, without the Ravnos and Tzimisce, who weren't about at that point in V5, there's something like 12 playable options, including the Thin Bloods, maybe 13, because there's the Caitiff and Thin Bloods. And 2 vampires per clan does not illustrate a city the size of Chicago. So we needed to drastically expand everything to fit all of those other vampires in and make the clans look powerful. So yeah, it's a book that expanded as we worked on it, and I'm very glad it did. So one thing, in fact, not one thing, let's get on to some questions from the gallery before we move on to another topic, of which we have many. I will answer some of them rapidly and put others to you folks on the panel with me. Killer Chandra says, are any books from Onyx Path being ported to Fantasy Grounds or Roll20? It's certainly a possibility that we're open to. Most of the time when it comes to things like Worlds of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, Exalted, it entirely depends on what our licensor in the form of Paradox and Renegade is happy with us putting in those virtual platforms. But there's no inherent restriction to us doing something like that. We're not exclusive to something like Drive-Thru RPG, because we sell books like Chicago and Cults in stores too, and you can pick them up from your friendly local game stores, or all of them through them online. So yeah, we're definitely open to the possibility if we get the permission to do so. So GM Dave 505 says, what's your favorite SPCs, your favorite vampires from Chicago by Night? So I am going to ask Steffi this, because Steffi, well, I know you didn't work on it, and in fact you can talk about your Let the Streets Run Red characters if you want to really talk about characters you created or worked with. But let's go to you first, Steffi. What are your favorite vampires that appeared in Chicago, Let the Streets Run Red? It's assorted source books.
I liked, I'm terrible with names, but I like the Prince Jackson. That's the current prince, right?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
the old one.
Kevin Jackson.
Beyond terrible. For the simple reason that he's new to the job, and I don't know if he's good at it. I don't think anyone is good at being prince, and I think that in itself is perhaps a good thing, to not be good at being prince. He does have like the arsehole bit down. I don't like him much, but in the Bloodlines games, one of my favorite characters is Lacroix. I know, don't at me. I like him because he is so easy to... He's big, he's outsized, he's present, he's cocky, he's arrogant, and he's very easy for players to unite against. And I think Jackson has that too. So... I can appreciate that in a prince. Like, at least he makes a big target.
And what about you, Clara? Who are your favorite characters that you either wrote or wrote in Chicago and associated books?
Malenkov.
Yeah, you're like a bastard.
Malenkov is... He is a project and an idea of how can I make a character as unlikable as possible? And I also took a lot of inspiration from Rasputin. There's a lot of similarities between the two. They're both charismatic, but horribly filthy and terrible and sneaky and sleazy. And yeah, I think I like him because he managed to do the job that I wanted him to do in my scenario. What I wanted to do was to create Sierra, and I wanted Sierra to be the representation of the clan La Sombra. That is, the likable side, the side that people are going to be like, oh, maybe we should have them join the Camarilla, And then we have Melancholy. It's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't because, and he did exactly what I wanted him to do. But at the same time, I had room to create a background story for him, so he wasn't just an asshole. There's a reason why he is the way he is. And that speaks to me not only as a writer, but also as a person, that even though, you can be a horrible person, there's still, an explanation to why you ended up that way. And having a little bit of empathy, maybe just a tiny little bit of empathy for Malenkov, I think gives him so much more depth and so much more relatability. I think the majority of players really hate him. I mean, he does start out the game meeting characters criticizing their every move. I dedicated a whole sidebar to that, different insults you can make for different clans. I had no idea that would go through to the final edit, but it did. Thank you, Matthew.
That's all right. Yeah. I'm a very stringent developer like that.
Yeah, but yeah, that is definitely my favorite character.
What about you, John?
I don't like any of them. No. My favourite character across all the books, probably one I wrote, funnily enough, is Melina Aronian, who is a Ventrue. It's a Ventrue concept I've had floating about actually for a while, and I was going to play with at one point. I ended up running a version of that character in a game that I ran for quite a long time. And I just really like the feel of that, a character that embodies that whole work ethic, came from nothing and got to the highest echelons of society through basically grind. That does exist in the world, but actually because of that, she's even more of a 1%er in some ways than the sort of born to rule, chinless, Alan Sovereigns of this world. Who, by the way, when I wrote him, Insider Fact, I was just listening to Big Time by Peter Gabriel on repeat while writing him. It really did just inspire. But I like just the complexity of a character that has that sort of in the dirt work ethic, but at the same time is as stately, as arrogant, and as believing in her own superiority, because how else could she not be superior? Because look what she's achieved. As Melina, I think she's probably the best character I wrote in the book, in my opinion.
I think Melina is in Chicago Folios.
She's in Folios. That's right.
Yeah. My favorite would be Edward Neely in Chicago by Night, because he was the first character written for Chicago by Night, and so he ended up being the character around which everyone else's template was built. So he's a character who was in the original Chicago by Night and the original Chicago Adventures, and I updated him for V5 so that the other writers could use that. So there's a bit of pride to that because we've continued following that template since. So some other questions for the group before we get on to other books. Victor Alves, 89, says, which next by night would you guys like to write next? Also, Kilashandra says, not Kilashandra, Agustin Puig says, are there other by nights on the way? So I'll answer that one quickly. There are no other by nights on the way from us at this time. Doesn't mean there won't be in the future. We were given the instruction at one point that Chicago is basically the template city. So any other city sourcebook would need to be very different. There's no point running through that same Prince, Primogen, Sheriff, Seneschal template every single time. And arguably that's what happened with previous editions of Vampire and why you didn't need as many by nights to run a successful city as a storyteller. So when we did Let the Streets Run Red, for instance, that's why Indianapolis and Milwaukee are presented in such unusual ways in comparison. That's why Copenhagen, as it appears in Trails of Ash and Bone briefly, is such a different domain. We are trying to make the domains look different each time, but the big question is whether that justifies an entire source book. As for me, if I could do an entire by night, I would go for the entire region of New England to update the rather shallow material in Dark Colony and Giovanni Chronicles 4 for 5th edition, because it's got some very interesting politics, can tie into Swan Song, one of the upcoming video games, which is set in Boston. And yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. What about you, Steffi? Where would you go?
Yeah, this is not going to come as a surprise to anyone who's ever talked to me about Vampire, but it would be Los Angeles. When we did Beckett by Night, I was immediately like, give me the LA chapters, all of them. I want all of them. And I'm still very proud of the work I did back then. When we started, we weren't allowed to touch the Bloodlines material, so we had to kind of hint. And I was so meticulous with that, like giving Nines a secret name so that people who read the book would be like, oh yeah, that's Nines. But the IP holder wouldn't be like, that's Nines, you have to take him out. And then White Wolf purchased the IP back, and it was like, you can use it. Okay, well, on the one hand, I'm happy, but on the other hand, I put a lot of work at being subtle. But no, I did the Anarchs for that and the Thin Bloods. I'm very proud of that. And yes, Jason Carl, if you're watching this and you're doing a book, call me. That would be my dream job, but also anything Dutch, because Dutch people are like all anarchs. So except for the rich ones. It'll be fun.
Except for the royal family, which I read today is the most expensive royal family in the world, apparently.
More expensive than yours.
Yeah, apparently they have exceeded the British royal family in terms of expense.
Yeah, I'm in favour of getting rid of them. Like, I feel like the French were onto something, but I'm happy to do it, with everybody walking away happily. But
a controversial topic for our largely European audience. What about you, Clara? What about you, Clara? Where would you set a by night book if you could?
I would set it in Edinburgh, actually. I just personally, because I love that city. It is my favorite European city. I've been there many times, and I think it's absolutely, there's something about Edinburgh that none other city has, and I'm sure everyone says that about their favorite city, but that's how I feel. I feel that there is a certain element of mysticism to Edinburgh, and there is a certain element of darkness to Edinburgh. I think that would fit incredibly well for a by night book. And there's so much history, so much to dig into that you could build an amazing by night book with.
And John?
I wouldn't do Edinburgh because I'm from Glasgow and I hate Edinburgh. No, I lived there for a year actually. So if you're hiring someone to do your Edinburgh book, it should definitely be Steffi because she missed out in Chicago by night.
Yeah.
I think if I was to do, I don't know, everyone sort of naturally defaults to, I'm from there, so I'd do that. And I do, well, as you well know, Matthew, I do have a thing of like, there's so much lore, and not just Vampire, but the world of darkness in general. There's in Scotland, things are happening, and there's crazy werewolves, and there's all this madness going on up there, but no one ever actually writes about the place. So I think that'd be a great, when you think about everything that's happening, if you're even doing a big crossover, if you want, not even maybe necessarily a by night book, but if you're just going, here's what's happening, Scotland's a mess because everything that's crazy is happening. And I would enjoy being involved in that. I think, realistically, I would quite like to do something in Italy, maybe Rome or Venice.
Yeah, those would be fantastic cities. Just
again, almost because of what Clara said, the sense of the history, the timelessness of it being evocative of a vampire setting. And I think it's a place as well that people around the world have that idea of it. So it would be easy to say to someone, here's Rome, here's all the cool things in Rome, and here's Venice, here's the canals, here's all these things. People understand that, and you would have a sense of that without even having
we managed to get Florence in Trails of Ash and Bone, so that was nice to get down into Italy for that. Now, I'm aware that 1 hour is not enough for us talkative people, but I'm going to say something off topic that I have again realised that of all of our European nations represented here on this call, we have all invaded each other or been invaded by each other at some point in history, with the United Kingdom of Britain and the Netherlands, with William of Orange, with Scotland and Britain, of course, and
I'm just going to say
I was going to say, but then we got the Danes, the damn Danes, arriving, harassing the Scottish East Coast, the English East Coast. It was one hell of a few hundred years. So there's, yeah, there's ancient enmities here.
Actually, I want to go back quickly to Clara's Edinburgh book. Because at the end of Fall of London, we hint heavily that Mithras has fled to Edinburgh to start his new cult. And I want to see a book where Mithras is trying to boss around a bunch of Scottish vampires who are like, nah.
So that's the end of him then, right? Okay. Like, confirmed Mithras is dead. That's it, confirmed. You don't need to...
They just found...
No more ambiguity. She's just dead. He tried to boss about a bunch of Scottish people.
Yeah.
They just found bits of him in a drainage ditch. So, well, let's talk about cults of the blood gods. And speaking of Mithras, and that's obviously been Onyx Path's other big vampire book that dealt with kindred religion, which was a subject very close to my heart. I wanted to deal with gods, with worship, with the horror of faith and belief and how it can be corrupted, subverted, and so on. And again, it's a book that's been very well received. I've seen comments in the chat to the effect of, I love Cults of the Blood Gods even more than I love Chicago. And this was a more experimental project for us to embark on. It's another book that you can now order through game stores too. You can order online, of course, through drive-thru, but you can order at your friendly local game store in traditional printed format. Likewise, we have a bunch of stretch goals for it. We have Children of the Blood, which is just come out in full. And as mentioned earlier, Trails of Ash and Bone has just gone out backers. Forbidden Religions is coming up. So, Steffi, this is a book you worked on.
Yeah.
And I recall you worked on it in two different sections. You contribute artifacts to the rise of the Methuselah cult, and you wrote the Mithraic Mysteries.
I did.
What memories do you have of this?
I did. So the Mithraic Mysteries was actually, I was doing Fall of London, which is about Mithras, and the Mithraic cults in Blood Gods at the same time. So that was a nice overlap. I'm also claiming the official position as expert on Mithras, which is weird because I do not like the dude. He stands for everything that makes me go, maybe not. But I think he is fascinating. I right from the get-go, I treated him as, he is a god. I don't know whether he is or whether he thinks he is, and he has the power to back up whatever delusion he has. But I've always treated him as he's a god and then take it from there. But actually, my favorite part of Blood Cults was the smaller sects. I did a sect of Gorgons who protect people. And my all-time favorite was I wrote this personality cult for Victoria Ash, which channeled a lot of me because I love Victoria. Like, I want to marry her. I'm so jealous that she's already married in-game. So there was this personality cult, and they were online exchanging messages about how much they loved Victoria Ash. And then it came back with red lines, and you were like, yeah, but they're online. Wouldn't the Second Inquisition catch them and kill them? This doesn't seem like a good idea. And I was like, okay, what if they're just not very smart? What if they're just making bad decisions? So my proposal, I don't actually know if we did that, but my proposal was to simply add a note saying that their messages were intercepted by the Second Inquisition and there was a team on the way. But I really loved writing them. That was like my did see fangirl channeling.
And what about you, John? You contributed a rather major part to Cults of the Blood Gods, one of its, I guess, central spokes. What would you like to talk about?
Well, first of all, I was delighted to work on Cults of the Blood Gods, not just because of the reason I'm about to state, which is probably the main thing that attracted me to it, but also because of what Matthew mentioned before, the idea of vampire religion. And it's something that anyone who's played with me before or watched the games that I ran will know that I loved doing that. I loved including these elements of faith and faith being tested in my games and in my stories. And a big part of that was what went into the character of Michalis Basaras, for example, in Chicago by Night, which is the first introduction of the cult of Shalim before Cults of the Blood Gods. He was already there. So I already had that in mind. So that was good coming into that. But what really, made me 100% must work on this, as you know, and as anyone who knows me knows, is that Clan Giovanni is my jam. And I know an awful lot about them. And the lore I find very fascinating. I was initially drawn to them because, again, it was just one of these things in Vampire and the World of Darkness that is, there's an inherently Scottish component to it. And I must say, I was initially drawn to the Dunsons just because I was like, I bet a bunch of Americans have written this and it's tartan and hokey and really weird. But to be fair to the original writers, it wasn't necessarily that. I wasn't kind of sitting there kind of going, oh my God, reading most of it. It was still fairly straightforward stuff and pretty good to read. And that drew me into Clan Giovanni. And then from that sort of base point, I absolutely fell in love with them. So when I was asked to come and join that book, and specifically to work on writing the Clan Giovanni, I was like, okay, so yeah, very, very moderate in my response, I'm sure, to your invitation. But as I was reading the email, I was sitting there, yes, this is it, so very, very happy to do that, and it seems to have been received well, which has pleased me.
Yeah, very, very well.
So
and Clara, you weren't on Cults of the Blood Gods, but you did co-develop.
Why didn't you hire Clara? Why didn't you hire Clara for Cults?
Why didn't you hire Clara? That's just rude. That is rude. Why didn't you hire Clara?
We're waiting, Matthew.
I do have a good reason for this, actually, and I will tell you somewhen. So, Clara, what are your thoughts on, let's talk about Children of the Blood a little, because you co-developed that. That was your first development gig for Onyx Path. What would you like to tell the audience about Children of the Blood?
It's a good book. Buy it. What do I have to say about it? I think, I'm proud of it. When I do a project, I want to do it, as I said about the sacrifice, I want to do it justice, because this is a brand that I respect so much and that I love so much. So I developed it with Matthew, and I think it turned out good. I think it turned out as a very useful book, which I think was my purpose, really, that I wanted it to be something that people are like, oh, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to bring it home and I'm going to use it in my game, because I can actually use this. I can actually flip through it and find new characters or find new ways to play my characters. I wanted it to be like a tool set more than anything else, because that's what I like as a storyteller, that I have availability to all of these new ways that I can play my game. I wanted the NPCs to be relatable. I wanted them to be something that you would look at as a storyteller and say, hey, that NPC, that he would fit perfectly into the game that I'm playing right now. And I can see, I can see parts of my father in him. I can see parts of my boss. I can see parts of one of my friends. I can kind of imagine myself play this character. I also wanted it to reflect what is so important in V5, and that is to focus on humanity and to focus on there's always been a focus on the battle between the inner beast and humanity, but even more so in V5. I wanted it to be a book where it wasn't just full of elders that could just beat your ass whenever they want to, could just snap their fingers and you would be dust. I wanted there to be some sort of relatability and humanity to the characters. There's nothing fun about having a character that can do anything, and there's nothing fun about playing an NPC that can just destroy all the players when they want to. At least not in my opinion. There needs to be flaws to all characters. Yeah.
It's one of the issues I've had as a developer when I sometimes get criticized no, it's not really criticism. It's people commenting, when are we going to be able to start getting more than 5 dots in a trait, or when are we going to get disciplines that are over 5 dots in power? And there comes a point, and this is my mind as a games designer, systems designer, and so on, that the rules stop facilitating play and start becoming a place. In a game where the standard difficulty is 6, for instance, if you are rolling over 10 dice in lots of dice pools, you're never going to fail. So the question is less about are you going to succeed and how well are you going to crush your opponent. So a book like Children of the Blood was in a major way about young vampires that, as Clara said, your characters can relate to SBCs that you can incorporate into your story who aren't necessarily antagonistic. They may be supporting characters, they may be contacts, they could be just interesting people in court, or they could be an entryway into a different plot. So I'm really happy with what we did there. Now, I know we are running short on time. And again, it's because an hour isn't nearly long enough for us to talk about V5. So I'm going to rattle through some of the questions here in the chat. And when I put them to my 3 co-panelists, I would like quick, punchy answers, and I will try and do the same thing. So let's see. Andrea Leora, I think we know who that is, asks, what are your favorite characters from Children of the Blood? So let's start with John.
Probably Gums.
Gums, yeah, you've remarked before you do love Gums. And Clara, your favorite character in Children of the Blood?
Gums. Honestly,
well, that was
John,
easy.
John, it's an amazing character. I loved it from one into the other. So, good job.
Yeah, take that, Dawkins.
I wasn't on Children of the Blood, and I haven't read
you
it
weren't
yet.
on Children of the Blood because
No.
we didn't invite you for that one.
Actually,
but
Clara
you were
did
on
try to
Forbidden.
hire me, but I'd already said yes to John, and I can't write 2 things at the same time.
Can't say no to John.
So-
That's it.
Yeah, at least I tried, Matthew.
Yes, they asked.
So I'm going to ask you, Steffi, what's your favorite cult, your favorite religion in Forbidden Religions?
Probably the Gorgons on a personal level. The Gorgons.
I know they're in Cults of the Blood Gods. I hate to correct you, but in Forbidden Religions,
Forbidden. I did this weird suburb remnant that was stuck in Madrid, and then they came over to Barcelona. But again, I'm terrible with names. I don't know what their name is.
That's the Spear of Orthia you're talking about. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, somebody else did the Spear, and then I did their opponents. But yeah, that one then.
All right, lovely. So next question up. So what title would you most like to be updated for V5? John? So this will be a book from a previous edition.
Clan Book Giovanni.
Okay, Clara?
I have
Any
no
previous
idea.
edition books? No, that's because it's a new edition. We don't need to update old books. Everything should be new. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And
Some of the clan books, but I cannot choose one.
I would like to do something like the Transylvania Chronicles and then find some weird way to bring all of that weirdness back.
Yeah, maybe without the Nosferatu antediluvian trying to fire nukes at people. That was a strange way to end the Transylvania Chronicles.
Yeah, I would probably retcon a few bits.
From his secret base in Antarctica. It's starting to sound like they came from Classified.
Okay.
So Mijari says, are there plans to explore the Sabbat more? I can answer that very quickly. Yes, there is a Sabbat book coming. It isn't by Onyx Path. It is by Paradox and Renegade, so keep your eyes open for that. GM Dave says, how is the job of connecting the lore of the Onyx Path V5 book so far? Your world building, this is amazing. Thank you very much, GM Dave. I'll answer this one nice and quickly. It is a challenge sometimes. The benefit, however, is the people I want to work with as developers, and the majority of the writers are very familiar with Vampire the Masquerade lore. I am, and admittedly, my level of knowledge is such that when I develop books now, I'm often proofing things to see whether, well, that vampire didn't exist in this year, and that kind of thing, more than does this cult actually make sense. That's what the other developers can do. But we're all very well studied on the lore of the World of Darkness. So we don't have we have the White Wolf wiki, but we don't have a big database of knowledge to make sure it all connects up. We retain it all from what we've played, what we've ran, what we've written before. And honestly, I'm very proud at how well we do it. Beckett's Jihad Diary is a testament to that as well. So Killer Chandra says, who is your favorite artist to work with on Vampire the Masquerade projects? Now, we don't work with artists directly as writers and developers, but that doesn't mean we don't have favorite artists. So John, who is your favorite artist on our Vampire the Masquerade books, playing favorites now?
Well, I have two, and one of them is Andrea Payne, because she's the nicest person that's ever existed. And the other is Amy Wilkins, because I'm absolutely blown away by her portraits. They're absolutely stunning.
And how about you, Clara?
Well, I really like Mark Kelly's art. I think it's very forward-thinking and interesting. Although I love a good portrait, I think that he has an ability to create a certain atmosphere in a book that little other artists do.
Another Scottish guy, by the way.
Yeah. Although he is living late. So he gave up on that cold, harsh life a long time ago. Steffi, who is your favorite artist?
I love Mark Kelly, but I also think that Blood Gods has one of the prettiest covers I've seen. I actually didn't check to see who did it, but
that is a Mark Kelly piece, the cover for Cults of the Blood Gods.
See, true to form.
Yeah, mine would probably be, well, any of the names mentioned. I'm also a big fan of Mirko Faloni. He's an excellent artist. So here's a question out of left field, but all of us have actually played with them now. From Velvet Sea, of all your collaborations with Red Moon Role Playing, which is your favorite? I believe we have all either played with or ran games for Red Moon Role Playing now. However, some of us will have only had one. So Steffi, what's your favorite collaboration with Red Moon Role Playing?
Yeah, I've only been on Legend Law, so it would be Legend Law. And they why don't they hire me is the question.
I should be referring you to them. That's the problem. It's always me. I'm the problem.
It's you. Yeah, refer me. Yeah.
Yeah. And John, you've only been in one, haven't you?
No.
Were you in two?
Yes.
I remember the mummy one. What am I forgetting? Oh, they came from Beyond the Grave. Yes. So which is your favorite?
Your game,
one?
Matthew. What? So, well, I'm going to go with one I wasn't in. I think the one you guys did, where you were all playing Giovanni, fun enough, or Hecata, I suppose. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the intrigue of it, and for me, it captured the very essence of the interfamilial politics.
And so, what about you, Clara?
I'm kind of torn, but currently I feel like it would be started and ended with Screams. Maybe it's because it's the most current in my mind right now, but I think having the opportunity to play children is a lot of fun, and it's very challenging. And I think it's one of those games that can kind of develop you as a person, where you kind of like retort back to, thoughts and feelings you had once. And that was helped by your amazing storytelling, Matthew. It could not have been done without it. You have a way to run games like that without it being uncomfortable, but still being terrifying. It's a Call of Cthulhu game, by the way, for those of you who haven't listened to it. But yeah, that would be my favorite one.
I'm currently playing in a Call of Cthulhu game. Clara is running for Red Moon Role Playing. I ran Cult Divinity Lost. It started and ended with Screams. I would say that was probably my favorite one from beginning to end. It started and ended, although we'll have to see how this Cthulhu game goes. The Beyond the Grave game was lovely, short and punchy, and I really enjoyed that as well. It was just a lot of fun to cram into 4 hours, I think, 3 or 4 hours. So we now have a question. World of Darkness News says, did you work with Renegade Games on the reprinting of Chicago and Cults for stores-wide distribution they announced yesterday? Yeah, that is all being worked on at a business level. It's not. It would be strange if it was being done without our knowledge. We are aware of it. There is communication. So yes, I didn't work on it personally, but that's because I'm just a humble writer and developer. So let's see, what else do we have here? Scrolling down for our last few minutes. Zach Rule says, are there supplements for Chicago or Cults of the Blood Gods that you would like to write but weren't able to? Steffi, was there a Chicago by Night book you would have liked to have written on but didn't get a chance to?
Just the one.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, I guess more broadly, are there any source books for those two books that you'd like to see expanding that subject matter? Steffi?
I'm thinking we have adventures, we have character photos. I think it might be fun to do like satellites to Chicago. We did that a little. But yeah, I think it would be great to do like a book of satellite cities to Chicago.
What about you, Clara?
I'm not sure.
And John?
Yeah, what more do you people want? You've got like everything in Chicago. God, like I've got nothing. There's nothing in Scotland. Nothing. You guys don't give us more Chicago. I'll hit you with Chicago. Enough of it.
Yeah, I would say we have plumbed the depths of Chicago and Cults at this point, so it would be nice to work on something different, World of Darkness related. Apparently Mithras has been deep fried in Scotland, so that was his fate, unfortunately. Another question, are there plans for more Onyx Path V5 books? There are no plans at this time. It entirely depends on how the business relationship works out with Paradox and Renegade. We are always open if the terms are right, and we always have ideas to work on these books. But yeah, it depends on what we're permitted to do. And yeah, all of that being equal. So we have about 1 minute left. So let's see, do we have any other questions? I'm scrolling down at rapid speed, and hopefully this isn't too... how are you going to handle the infernalism in Forbidden Faiths or Forbidden Religions? So John, you can talk about that. That can be our closing thing. How do we handle infernalism in a non-Barley way?
By giving it to someone who is not necessarily in love with the notion of particular elements of infernalism. And I have to say with no hesitation that the writer, Emily Griggs, who dealt with the infernalist stuff, was absolutely sensational and knocked out the park. Some of the best stuff I've read so far. And
one last question for you, Clara. What historical period would you like to write a book in?
The Renaissance.
The Renaissance. Any
Yes.
particular country you'd see the Renaissance from?
I think I'm going for France. I feel like a lot of things happened. France or Italy. A lot of things happened in the Renaissance in that area.
Yeah. And Steffi, last question for you then is there a Vampire the Masquerade streaming show that you'd like to see become an official product, a sourcebook chronicle, etc.? I know you want to do LA by Night, but
I do, but isn't that official? I think that's official.
Well, that's official, but you've also got Tremere firing lightning bolts out of their hands. So
yeah,
who can say?
That's fair. That's fair. Actually, I think Atlanta by Night does a stellar job. I don't watch a lot of. I'll be honest. I don't watch a lot of streaming games because my attention span is not that long. But occasionally, I get glimpses, and I like what Atlanta is doing.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much to all of my panelists. It has been absolutely wonderful having all of you on. Thank you very much to all of the viewers. It's been wonderful to have you watch. Please, if you have any time over this weekend, do go over to our website, which is linked in the chat, to sign up to games to participate in. They're very low cost. Money goes to charity. Please donate to our charity, the Bodhana Group. We have a target number we want to hit. And, even if you're playing a game for the first time just to learn the rules, or you want to run a game for the first time just to learn the rules, you can do that. Advertise a game as they came from beneath the sea rules playing around session or something like that. And people will join you just so you can have a chance to fiddle around with the rules, get familiar with the game. It can all be casual. You don't need to appear on camera. You can do it on Discord, voice only. It's all absolutely fine. I beseech you, please do sign up to games or run games. That is the purpose of this convention alongside these panels, and donate money to our charity. I would really appreciate it. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. In an hour's time, I will be running Vampire the Masquerade for a group including Clara, and it will in fact be the follow-up session to The Family Chronicle that I ran for Red Moon Roleplaying. So it will be taking us back to Atlantic City and some familiar characters. So do check that out. I think that's on the Vorpal Tales channel. Maybe not. Just look on the schedule. You'll be able to find it. And yeah, thank you very much. And goodbye. Everyone wave uncomfortably.